So I'm here with Stephen Christopher's olive branch Mercury, or Naylon as he would be known. And since he has done us the honor of speaking with us today, let's welcome him with the 9 vibrations I have set out for him, and I'm going to repeat that a few times. And to Naylon, one of the things that this is this includes the date, but it also represents you specifically. So if you're okay
do you
with
have
that.
like a timeline set up? Sure, yeah. Go ahead.
Mazem navo exaflumget fuan. Mazev navo exaflumget fuan. Mazem navo exaflumget fuan. And as you might be aware, we are a city of 9 gates, so that's why I have picked 9 vibrations to say in the Vmmh language. But if you'd like to introduce yourself before I get to the main questions, let's categorize you first. Male, of course. So which age group do you fall in? The under 25 or?
I am 20 years old.
Okay. So what?
20 years old. Did you hear that?
I was unaware of your age. But so what would you like the audience to know about you before I?
Well, I guess I just want to start by saying I like that you started to think about the 9 gates. I'm not sure exactly what I guess it was a prayer. You said non-vibration, so I guess it's you representing your neutrality. So that's pretty cool. But about the 9, I guess I like to say that I represent the number 9. It's a completion number, you know. And so the seal that I have on my chest, it's 3 interlocking triangles, which makes a 9-pointed star. And so what it's supposed to be is it's branding you as a complete product to be preserved before the sun stops and incinerates all the life that does not go underground with me and my king, Stephen Joseph Christopher. And so basically all I do is I tell about just the ice, you know, justice, just ice. The ice attached to the bottom of the silicate ionosphere, which is going to unfurl like a scroll when the sun stops, erupts. The celestial sphere is going to burst because glass has a trait where when temperature changes really fast in front of it, it doesn't just change to a rubbery state, which does happen in front of the sun, which displaces the stars behind it, as seen with a coronagraph. It's not gravitational lensing; it's literal glass lensing.
So not exactly that much nicer sounding of an ice than the abbreviation ICE that we're familiar with.
What abbreviation of ICE are you referring to?
Immigration something. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a double-edged sword. There's certainly a sectioning happening here. That's why I'm kind of vibrating in my voice, because what I'm talking about is kind of grave. The fact that I have to say this at all implies God is a God of judgment. He's a consuming fire. He's a refiner's fire and a fuller's soap. So he's cleansing us. First was the surface cleansing with the flood, and now as a bow in the clouds, as a promise not to flood the earth again, is a promise that he's going to crunch it with ice.
Well,
hail will sweep away the reputable lies.
Much like the dual aspect of something in particular that I do address probably more than anybody else, or in detail more than anybody else at the very least. I mean, as far as YouTube goes and free material. You know, in the Enochian thing, there's that idea of the wreath to the righteous and a torment to the wicked, and you know, all at the same time. And the sun is the sun as a sword, and the moon is a penetrating fire, but it's if you're on the right side, it's a good thing. I mean, it's it's pleasant and all that, at least in the end.
Well, yeah, I like that you mentioned some verses it says the Lord is the sun and a shield, the moon being the shield, as in this thing which will shield Australia during the solar eclipse when the sun stops. But then there's also the sun is a flaming sword, flaming in Hebrew, which actually means covert, meaning a flaming covert sword going every which way is in reference to the sun up inside the middle of the earth, making a divergent centrifugal light spectrum, which causes the sunrise-sunset illusion over the optical edge of the horizontal crease. Because really you live inside of the earth and not on the earth. So light is bending up, not straight over trillions of light years, 93 million miles away. So
So
this
what do you
finite trick. So who can make straight that which God has made crooked? Ecclesiastes 7:13. That's what it's
you
really about.
you've mentioned you've mentioned the eclipse. So what do you think of this next major solar eclipse passing through pretty near to the antipodes? You know what an antipode is? The opposite side of the world, basically, of Mecca, Jerusalem, Medina, Damascus, that sort of thing. It's all and it's the area also where H.P. Lovecraft thought that Cthulhu was. So that is
Where is the antipode of Jerusalem? Is that over Australia?
the South Pacific.
South Pacific. So
So
that's a bit to the right.
so it's it's on the side on the American side of Australia, but
Okay.
it's going to cut. The eclipse is going to be over. It's going to cut across South America and then go into the South Pacific.
What's the dates of the eclipse?
Is it early in July? I don't. I could look it up here, but yeah, I got myself a. No, I don't. No, it's gonna. I can't pull up things on my chat, but yeah, I don't
As
remember
far
what
as
it
the
is.
implications of your question, as far as the implications of your question goes, like I obviously can't predict when the sun's going to stop. What I can, like, weigh the balances of and have faith in is that we have to invoke martial law before this happens, at least a good amount of time before this happens, in order to section the people with this 9-pointed ensign for the nations, in order to corral as many people as possible into these network of deep underground military bases, which are connected by these magnetic levitating trains, which are already been all created. So knowing this, you say, what are these being created for? These powers that be, they can't all be evil. They have to understand that they have to have precognition to this event. They have to know that there's glass in the sky. They have to be aware of the fact that NASA is using all of these funds specifically to make these deep underground military bases because they're the ones doing it.
Okay, it's the 2nd of July.
The 2nd of July is the solar eclipse.
Yeah.
I mean, if it really was like a thing that was so quick, like only in a month's time, you had to do it as quick as possible. Like that would make sense why it says only 2/3 will be cut off. But I don't want that to happen. I really hope that we can do this at least 6 months to a year before, at least a couple years before. I mean, that's why the Lord Stephen Christ has to be exalted. He has to be lifted up. And we have to believe, we have to have the faith that there are people who are programmed with the love to exalt him, who have power to do so. Because it says
You
in the Bible that the first, the
you
last will be
mentioned
the
you mentioned all
first.
these bases and such things. What have you witnessed yourself, or is this inferred a sense, as
Well,
you said, belief?
I've seen photographs online. I've seen lots of different documents about magnetic levitating trains. First, the technology that we have for it and how it's growing, as well as specifically places underneath, like locations like the Denver International Airport, Buckley Air Force Base, Mammoth Hill, and they apparently, in some documents, literally say that they all converge to Pine Gap, Australia, like intercontinentally. So obviously this is hearsay. They have photographs of literally the magnetic levitating trains. I haven't seen the tunnels connecting. They say they have these photographs of these tunnels, and they have the photographs of the bases, and they have the photographs of the trains and the Denver International Airport. You've seen the murals, how they kind of are conditioning you to some sort of military corralling of all of the races. Like, it's just literally saying that.
Well,
They have the horsemen of the apocalypse on there. Like, they know.
it does appear apparent. It does seem apparent that, not only you look into the fiction and other sorts of art, I guess you would call it, that have came forth, and it turns out that a lot of people that did this stuff were guided by their nightmares. I mentioned H.P. Lovecraft. He had this. He had a scary spiritual life. I tell you what. But you know, there are things that you kind of wonder about that they're putting forward in the media. Like, I don't remember what the name of this. There was this big long movie, like a 5-hour movie, or I don't know how long it was. It wasn't your typical length of movie. It was pretty long, where basically the good guys look like your stereotypical demons, and I thought uh, it's like the Poppy thing. I thought Poppy was if you've heard of that. Basically, I thought it was basically, is this what a woman's like when she's really really high on drugs or something, or are they just trolling internet people? um but it's gotten kind of more sinister lately.
Well, I know what you mean by there's like we like some fucked up media, and there's definitely a weird polarization aspect that we fetishize. But in a way, there's also an inverse proportional movement of people who believe, you know, I mean, I'm sure you know, like people who believe that Jews are like the Bolshevik people who are Nazis nowadays, like alt-right people, maybe alt-right sympathizers. They believe. Like, I'm not even saying against them. I'm not choosing the side. This neutrality here. I'm saying it's now an image that Jews are like demons. They are the demons, and so like your face, your red hair, that's like Ishmael, that's Shemite, and then you have a red star in your background, like literally. So like we are all Satan, we are all the devil, we are all demons. And so in a way, these artists, they're trying to say they're basically exposing themselves. They are repenting. They're saying, I'm a demon. This is me. This is what I love. I'm a demon. This is why I'm using these imagery constantly. I'm a demon. Like I am a devil.
Well, you're aware that various things like various symbols have multiple meanings. It's like, for example, uh, you know, the Easter was just observed. Both the Catholic and the Orthodox Easter have passed
Yeah,
us,
the East air, the East star, the Eastern
and
star who scattereth
they
east wind on
in
the earth.
accordance with 3 verses in the Bible, the Easter Vigil in the Catholic Church, Lucifer's the name for Jesus, but they, Milton and, well, I don't know if Dante actually used this, but definitely Milton sort of demonized the term Lucifer, but Lucifer means I bring the light. And, Venus just traces this star every 8 years, and then it traces the petal every 40 years. So you have like a rose. And, it means different things. And obviously the Venus statues being female, it's like female fertility. What's the bad thing about that one?
And
But this
Venus,
this flag behind me, yeah, I thought it looked like, I thought it, I knew it was a Moroccan flag. I thought it looked like, something out of the Grail Knight stories or something like that. And I thought, yeah, I want that. I can, identify with that. There's another version, an older version of the Moroccan flag that's basically like the sun door. It's gray on white, but it's, it resembles like a prayer mat, but basically your gateway through. But
did you know that over the course of 5 years, the planet Venus, its superior and inferior conjunctions make a pentagram over the course of 5 years, like over and over again? It makes two pentagrams actually, and they mirror each other. And so actually, if you take
well,
two
okay,
pentagrams and you
okay,
connect
five
them
years.
at their
Okay,
base, and it makes
okay,
a
yeah,
star.
I thought it was every 8 years with the zodiac. It does that, but 5 years, it kind of, yeah, because they do kind of shift positions, and it's like people act
Like
like
if you make the
ancient man
celestial
used to
sphere,
track these things in the sky.
if you make the celestial sphere stationary and like track its parallax relative to that, that's how you get the pentagram. But
Well, there's various things, ding, 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 ding. Obviously, that's 5, and you can do it again. You know. So, what do you think the purpose of life is?
well, obviously, it's the fact that we have limitation as all is because God values some sort of quality that limitation gives, which I think is relationship. Like if your idol is infinite freedom through sacrifice, then you're always going to reject relationship through an a priori a Protestant repudiation of authority, like literally protesting. So that's why Protestants are really no better than Satanists, ultimately. So like what it ultimately is relationship. And so there are things which benefit
Well,
relationship,
as you may
which
be aware, sort of two things that you can say about the word religion is relationship and regulation. So, I mean, we got to admit that something's somewhere, anyways. But I think
and
uh,
religion
a
means
general a
ligament.
general thing about the Protestants is the ritualism, which ends up being their church.
Because it's own ritualism.
We have no ritual, and it's like, are you kidding me? I've been with you guys when you've prayed a few times, and it's been the same thing, and you're saying, oh, just because it doesn't have ecclesiastical authority and the ecumenical councils doesn't mean that just your particular church has weaved out the thing. And now more than ever, we're getting to the point where church after 10 years ago, well, not quite 10 years ago, but when Mitt Romney ran, people were like, oh, we got to admit that the other Christians are Christian, or we're not going to get our, he did not win the presidency, but that was one of the things they were hoping by developing that tolerance. And then they gave up on that. Now it's the point where if you say basically the same thing, but your creed is worded differently, you're like, somehow they're not Christian, even though they're Bible believing, maybe even more than them, but they don't say the creed quite the same as this church.
Yeah, and I don't, when I say relationship, I don't mean, and when I say relationship and ligament to God, like I don't mean a ritual. I mean obedience to the words that come out of his mouth, like his mouth out of his face because he has a face, from his tongue because he has a tongue, like as an imminently in the flesh and his imminent I'm an ant representation. So
Well,
that's what
what
I
is
mean by
your
relationship, as opposed to like this idea of like eating like some like wafer every day to think that like you're remembering the fact that you're eating from the fact that you're inside of his body, you're in his womb, you're in his earth, and everything that you eat, all the animals you eat are literally the Christ. You're eating his flesh, you're drinking his blood. Like you are a duplication of him pouring out his spirit unto death. The fact that he
well
limited himself to be
without
in the flesh, that's what you are a duplication of.
without becoming one, certainly the anointing. Well, one of the things that goes way back with the Mithric religions is, the symbolic meal of the Savior, of the Savior entity that is interceded, and but any meal with outside of the authority can be a spiritual act. If you look at the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, I saw a video where where Stephen was holding a Bhagavad Gita, I think it was, and
Yeah.
the people, the main group, I think, for the West that publishes this is one that says it's not about being vegetarian or anything like that. It's about being Krishnatarian, that everything you eat is, for the God of light, basically. So, did I ask? Did you explain what the what is the meaning of life? I guess, or what is the purpose mean? You say following commandments of some sort, but um,
What I mean is heaven is wherever, oops, sorry. Heaven is wherever you are with Stephen, because worshiping grace is being able to, the fact that you're alive and that you are in relationship with your creator. like who he is. That's what I'm saying you should value, I guess. That's what I'm offering, his relationship with him. And so that's what's valuable. And so the tree of life is the words that polarize the ether through desire. The fruit of good and evil is the thing which is authored by the tree of life. So like I'm not talking about good and evil because any Protestant could say, no, sacrifice is my idol of what is good. What I think is good is preservation ultimately, in obedience to Stephen, because he wants to shepherd people underground before the sun stops. But most people will claim him to be some sort of oppressor because he's using martial law to say only people who get sealed are allowed to go underground, that this is how the sectioning is going to happen.
So, okay, I'll just move to the next question. I don't remember what that. When you do the right thing, is it more likely to be out of love of doing good, pleasing God, personal enjoyment or pleasure, the hope of the results of your deeds, the fear of the consequences of not doing the right, or hate for doing wrong, or even those who wouldn't do the same?
Read them off one more time.
Basically, love, pleasure, hope, fear, and hate.
Love, pleasure, hope, fear, hate. Well, you love because you fear. You hate because you love. You hope because you fear. Because you want. Because you love. It's all the same. It's all one action. It's me. It's who I am. Hence why I have Stephen's name on my chest. And I want people to also do so in order to show that they love him and survive. Because that's that's really the determining factors. If you love his appearing, despite, like if you can forgive him, if they who have been evil can forgive themselves enough to take a seal as well. I mean, because everyone will be a new creation in Christ. Even those sick people who are going to be flushed out. The reason why the sun's going to stop is to flush them out, ultimately. I mean, it's also to expedite the kingdom.
What
So
would your
it's like a...
What would your answer be to those who would bring up the verse in the Bible that condemns tattoos and the verses
Old
that talk
Testament.
about the mask of the beast, mark of the beast? How does this relate to this seal? Is you know, those people are going to claim that this seal is that sort of thing if they
Well,
see it having.
I admit and agree that Revelations is like a mind game. Like Mercury, like it says one of the seven. It doesn't say the vials are the planets. Like I say that there are 7 transparent containers, the eyes that move to and fro throughout the earth, the lamps. But Revelation doesn't say that the planets, but it says one of them is poured out onto the people that take the mark of the beast. In my model, it's Mercury. And so it's what it says, it gives grievous sores to the people who don't have the mark of the beast. And what I actually interpret that is I am Mercury. So see, Stephen gave me that title, as in Mercury and Venus are the 2 planets that go in front of and behind the sun, before the sun in the dawn. They're the only 2 planets to do that. So we're the 2 witnesses that stand beside the Lord before the whole earth. And right now we're figuratively dead in the streets of Babylon, while he is incarcerated in prison. But what the grievous and noisome and grievous sores are is basically like the guilt and the shame that would ignite one to take the seal itself. You know what I'm saying? So what I'm trying to say is it's a mind game. It actually says in Revelations 13, it's not victory from, as in away from the mark of the beast. It's victory from the mark of the beast, as in you gain victory from it. Besides Revelation, there are so many other verses in the Bible that talk about the standard for the people, marking Cain for protection. Anybody who tries to hurt Cain after he's been marked for protection will be cursed 7-fold. talks about like his descendants being marked for protection, being grafted in Romans 11. So like a crown of glory, a diadem of glory in the palm of my hand. It talks about I will write my new name on the palm of your hand and on your heart. Revelations 3:12. I don't remember all of these verses, but I know that these are phrases. You can look these phrases up and you can find them on Bible Hub. But
what do you think happened before birth? And of course, I mean the mystical function, not the physical process.
Before, like how did I come into the womb? Well, I guess first you got to start the foundation. I believe we are one spirit animating through a bunch of portals. So there's a 1 and a 0. So the eye of Sauron is just a 1 inside of a 0. So the 1 is the spinal column. Like he's the dick entering the womb hole, the portal of the mother. So the womb of the earth, and then the coctahedron up in the center of the earth. It's got an XYZ axis. It's just lines and divergence and convergence, a centrifugal and a central pedal, making the circular radial circuit of all the. So the light from the center is diverging, like perpendicularly from the Bode spherical glass prism, making it look like it's coming from outer space, but it's actually inner space. So it's actually just a bunch of circles, like a bunch of converging circles, and so that's all the flesh is. It's just a double helix type of. Like 2 polarizing bowls, that's what an X is, and so it's like your muscles are connected by like these X ligand structures. That's what bones are. Like you're just diverging and converging circuits, and so it's one spirit inseminating a whole. So it's the white painting the black. It's this. The various elements have a absorption and reflection spectrum. So like black is an object's ability to absorb color. White is an object's ability to reflect or emit light. So they work together depending on the elements. And so it's just one animating spirit. We're all puppets. And so whether or not there's any continuity involved is whether or not God like has some sort of value towards like setting up some sort of storyline. Like Stephen once said that I am actually the reincarnation of Saint Stephen from the book of Acts. Obviously, I don't remember that, but he says it's the truth. So Saint Stephen is the guy who got whacked for believing that he saw Christ like ascend, or leave them. Obviously, so what Stephen says is he didn't ascend up into heaven. He just disappeared from them, and then he appeared somewhere else in the world, and he lived the rest of his days in Kashmir, India.
So are you saying more or less that you and Travis are like the, in your opinion, is like the 2 witnesses that are like in the book of isn't the book of Revelations that has the 2 witnesses go forth before and then they're slain before they go
yeah, that's what I said. I'm figuratively dead right now in the streets of Babylon, or the Babel-on, because right before Stephen was arrested, and then for threatening Donald Trump, he's in Butner, North Carolina, maximum security prison right now, and so we're just kind of all alone right now in a motel, waiting for him to be released by his angels and be exalted. It's like we understand the stakes, but obviously Donald Trump, for whatever reason, can't seem to rise to the occasion, or feels like his ducks aren't in a row yet to exalt him. Because we believe he's got to be in the know. He has to understand the stakes. He ran on draining the swamp. Hillary Clinton's the one who ran on breaking the glass sky. I feel like Donald Trump at least understands a bit more whether or not he's done anything bad. We have to take advantage of our resources.
There's been even some are saying that there has been even more threats against the current president than Obama, which would make sense, some of the people that are against him. But so, it's highly possible. What if he doesn't know, everybody, because you look on, I was looking for the clips of Stephen back in 2009, or was it 2008 or 2009? I think it was. Yeah, 2009. There was multiple. There was a series of people that actually made the news in Mississippi, So he wasn't the only one. And but so I've mentioned there. Are there any conspiracies that you would think you have knowledge to say, yeah, that's not it?
Well, I mean, definitely chemtrails aren't trying to poison you. It's aluminum, barium, and strontium. They're fire suppressants. They're trying to keep heat from rising to the ice mantle attached to the glass sky to temporarily put off the problems that they caused themselves. But it's inevitable. They should just exalt Stephen instead of pretending like it's not gonna fall. Let's see.
Yeah, excuse me while you're talking, but what do you think happened? What do you think will happen during your death or after it?
Well, I mean, if I did die, I feel like me waking up in the morning, the distinction between being asleep and being awake, it's like a thought of acknowledgement of what's in front of me, and it's some sort of super powerful intelligence that allows me to move amidst that and like comprehend it in a way that's not like kind of dumb to myself. It tricks myself to think that I'm not dumb. Like it says, oh wow, you're thinking about that in a really smart way. So it's just a thought that's like turned on basically. So I feel like if I died, I would just reincarnate in a womb, because I feel like all life is inside the earth. Life comes through wombs. I don't believe there's any life outside of this womb. But I believe God fearfully creates. He understands the distinction between, a vacuous creation or like creating for no reason. So like, even though he created suffering purposefully to be flushed out, it's specifically for the purpose of ultimately our rest, so that we can understand the distinction between like training us to become our gods of our own omniverse versus training you to enter into his rest in the kingdom of God, because that's what the supposed new age, like Gnostic, or any sort of idol sacrifice. Some Mormons believe that actually, that's literally what they're going to get. So they believe in an idol of transfiguration, basically, by default. It's the Protestant a priori. So that's literally actually what the problem is with everything. Like even that's the problem with capitalism, because it's people who think that they can just get it in the world through their sacrifices, like they can sacrifice to the people. So ultimately what that means is there needs to be a standard above all of those sacrifices, which can properly weigh the balances. That's not tricking mob rule through the illusion of choice, but is really just the right choice all the time.
Speaking of sacrifice, what would you have to say about there's conditions of the law of atonement laid forth, in what we call this portion of the Bible here, that there's various terms that would differ with the Christian idea of atonement, in terms of nobody, it's not a human being isn't an animal that is lawful to eat. It wasn't killed in the way, it wasn't killed in the name of God. Those who touched it, those who say their sins were forgiven are this counted for them. They didn't touch it. They didn't pay for it. The butchering wasn't right. I think there are some other conditions, but how do you counteract that idea?
Restate your question, like the main part of your question.
Well, the general Christian idea of atonement seems to be something different, and the idea of
the idea that Jesus literally needs to have his blood siphoned from his body in order for people to be justified. Yeah, I don't agree with that. I believe that the idea of him allowing the Jews to crucify him on the cross because he authored that is literally the action of like forgiveness. Like it's literally the medium of him deciding, hey, I'm not going to judge you right now. I'm not going to flush you away. I'm going to wait to be exalted later. So right now you can kill me, And so that's literally the mode of forgiveness. And so his long suffering, his stripes literally is your salvation. It's equal. It's equated to. It's like a math problem as opposed to like some sort of alchemical transfusion. Like that's what I believe.
Well, in Surah 3, 54 of Al Quran, I think that's the reference. It mentions, I shall cause your, God says to Jesus, I will cause your death and then I will exalt you. So that, I guess you can say that, well, it doesn't say it has to happen all at once there. Well, so what do you generally believe, to sum up what you believe about deity, what would you say in short?
About deities?
Deity, divinity, God, whatever phrase you're going to use.
Just beingness. I mean, the ultimate capstone of I am, and then his judgment standard defines his personality. So basically, what he wants, his desires, is his mode of being. That's the logos, his words, what comes out of his mouth. And so ultimately, he created a world of limitation, meaning he desires something that limitation offers, which is relationship, which is the kingdom of God, ultimately, with him as the king, which he wants to make the distinction between like a perverted, abusive father king, like someone who like owns a pedo camp versus someone a benevolent agape love father type thing. Like he wants to make that distinction. So he creates the two, and then he is going to section between the two. Because it's not also just about that. It's also about filling in all the gaps of like your mental cognition between whether or not the potentiality of you becoming a god of your own omniverse, the vacuousness that would imply through infinite sacrifice, if that was your idol of eternal freedom as opposed to relationship. Like you'd have to assume like, oh, it is equated to as if I was eating these babies, just like these people who were programmed to do. If I was just to assume that I could create infinitely, freedomly, forever, just for no reason, just draw forever. I'm an infinite God. There's no reason to do it. But hypostatic kenosis, that's what he values.
Yeah, you mentioned a limited universe. Certainly, like, for example, I have elsewhere I've drawn, a bunch of places, I guess, in my life, and talking to people, I've drawn the difference between, like, when we look at gender, the male and the female, they have certain, I'm not saying they're inherently unequal or whatever in an overall sense, but you got to admit that certain physical and psychiatric traits, there's a dominance, the one over the other, and that obviously shows a limit. But so since we are in a limited universe, what limits would you ascribe to God?
Well, basically, he doesn't remember everything. He remembers your sins no more because he doesn't want to remember all the bad stuff that he created. Forgiveness is mercy. I mean, forgetfulness is mercy because he's giving himself something else. So, not knowing everything is implied in that as well. Like he learns what he needs to know when he needs to know it. He has the potentiality to learn things really well. He's got the latent potential of judgment.
What would you say to the idea that it wasn't evil that was created, it was that there was opportunities, and because creation didn't creation brought about evil by their choice, but evil itself wasn't a creation? What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, that's literally, I think, what God means by saying, like, the fruit of good and evil, like, that's a kind of whatever fruit, because I create that with the fruit of life. But that's my judgment. Like, I say what's good and evil. Like, I don't care, like I'm going to say, like, right now, like, that you have the opportunity to do that. And me saying that's good and evil, you could say that doesn't mean anything. Like, sure, fine. But then my desire to just snuff that out, that's just, like, that's my opportunity. So, like, the opportunity to say something is good and evil is equal to saying good and evil is just an opportunity. So like that's what I think that means. Like God is acknowledging that good and evil is just a judgment standard. Like it's literally just me saying that's what I desire, what I thought was possible through my sacrifice, type of thing. Which is why someone can say, hey, when the sun stops, maybe that's my opportunity to become a god of my own omniverse. Maybe that's an opportunity to ascend to Goloka Vrindavana, where Krishna is at. But
what do you
believes he's Krishna? So,
what are your favorite attributes of divinity?
My favorite attributes of divinity is The Joker. Comedian part.
So what do you mean by
that's
that?
the comedian part's like the subset of the fact that he's so merciful. I mean, just the fact that all the suffering and the pain and stuff is mainly just a joke ultimately, because there's so much awesome planned for us. Like it's all gonna just it's gonna wipe away like instantly. It's gonna flick like that. The veil is gonna just
What do you?
just gonna click in.
What sort of thing? what? Excuse me. What sort of things do you think that it would be hard to do in the name of God?
Capital punishment, which is why it's called capital, as in the capital letter A is the first one, can only do it. Only Stephen can do it. I mean, he can like order his army to do things, which is what Bible says happen. But
So what?
nobody nowadays can say that because Stephen hasn't told anybody to do that yet.
Well, what do you say about the cruelties of prison and the
Well, that's definitely why Stephen is in prison right now. He's trying to setting a standard. He's going to set the prisoners free. He's preaching to them right now. He's showing the hypocrisy of mental health psychologists, because they're trying to say they live on a spinning ball, but obviously they don't. You live in a finite universe. Light refracts through glass. Lifts up your line of sight to the center. So like
well, plenty of people have you ever been out to sea where all there is sea to see, and you can kind of see a slight curve to the earth, and you can see the from different latitudes, you can see the change in the sun shadow, and I've witnessed some of that myself. That's
are you talking about
the
concave curvature?
Planets, being what they are, rather than like that, instead of the mathematics is a lot simpler for it being a being a sphere.
Tiny celestial sphere. Yeah, I agree. I mean, just think about Io, the planet. I mean, the Jupiter's moon, Io. It takes 42 hours to oscillate Jupiter. The circumferential orbit of that, like, I mean, that's supposed to be like 300 times like wider than Earth's moon around. I mean, Earth, but Earth's moon takes 28 days to go through its entire cycle. Like, I mean, I feel like that's proof right there that Jupiter is tiny. Io takes 42 hours, but Earth's moon takes 28 days.
So what in general, what do you do in sorry. In general, what do you do in the name of God?
I just tell people that they live inside of the earth and that they should get the seal whenever Stephen is exalted over martial law, because that's going to be the way. Like, he is the way, he is the truth to life, to preservation, redemption, forgiveness of humanity. It's like this idea of like New World Order is bad. Like, that's totally that is a not biblical idea. It's not a biblical idea. It's not that I'm using Bible as my like foundation. I'm using Stephen as my foundation because I met him.
Well, there is merit to the idea of looking at there's these these people who think that, oh no, not a peacemaker. We don't want a great Middle Eastern peacemaker. We want the one who brings the war and all that. That will be the right side to join. And it's like, wait, You're telling countries not to get along. So, you look at 2003, instead of making peace with the Taliban, which you can see, the Taliban offered after September 11th, hey, if there's proof, we'll get the guys. Show us the proof, and we will go after them ourselves if that's what you want us to do. And in October, they said, hey, just stop the bombing. We don't care if they're guilty. Just stop the bombing and, stop killing hundreds of thousands of people, and we'll take care of it. So obviously, and you find references to, certain conservative Christian teachings that have motivated a lot of the people in charge of these policies, that they think, well, we can't start peace and we have to have wars in certain areas. So they try to create wars in certain areas because they think that Jesus will not come back if we don't make things really, really bad first. And
Oh, I've heard stuff like that.
My father worked for a guy in Oregon, and I met him one summer, and the guy had owned this place for like a couple decades or a few decades or something, and he didn't want to plant tree. Instead of having an orchard and making money from the orchard and having being able to stay there for forever, basically, and well, not forever, but they could just basically stay on this massive property and run the resort. Well, not resort. I guess you could call it a resort, but he didn't want to plant trees because Jesus was showing up too quick, and it's like it's been longer than I've been alive, man. You gotta do something. But so how much time?
A lot of them. Sorry, go ahead.
How much time do you think could be devoted to spiritual or religious practice on a weekly basis?
I mean, I feel like there's always a time for rest, but you could always be doing something, at least for, like in my case, like I try to spend all my time spreading information about Stephen. But people who don't know about Stephen, I feel like they always at least try to fill their boredom because they feel some sort of guilt, like at least. So like doing something isn't inherently for God, but like trying to do something that you think is like beneficial to what you think is God. Like some people think God is like this transcendent thing. Like I'll treat people to be like their own individual, or some people want to serve the state. So like it's polarizing in that kind of way. Some people think God is the state. Some people think God is the individual. But I think it's like it's neither but both. You know what I'm saying?
So in a time sense, what would you say this would a basis of such things would be on a daily basis for a regular person?
Well, I mean, I wake up at like 12. I stream till like 4 in the morning. That's about it. And I talk to people on Discord all day. Like it's like 25 people in a chat room, and they'll all be like screaming and yelling at me because they're like all atheists, and I'm like trying to tell them like, hey, did you know there's glass in the sky, and you live inside of a finite universe, and that you don't live in an infinite expansive wasteland. Like Milky Way band is a swaddling band at 60 degrees. It divides the celestial sphere into two polarizing magnetic currents. So the sun goes one direction when it passes the Milky Way band on the solstices.
So
Its highest and lowest point.
What do you say to those who will say that even though they aren't aligned with Stephen, that they are, they don't perceive themselves to be experiencing any unnecessary guilt, shame, or fear?
I mean, most people who don't like have any sort of holy fear, like fear of loss, then they're not going to respect like in any sort of conversation. Like say like you're talking to someone and you don't want them to stop talking to you, like you're gonna fear what you might say to them. Like you're going to weigh the balances. You're going to create fearfully with mistakes in mind, and you're going to bear those mistakes as your own because you want it to stay.
you speak of these prophecy, these claims of prophecy, which Stephen has made, and so have you experienced prophecy?
Well, I mean, usually when I'm like walking with Steven, when I was with him, like I feel like the world just kind of became illuminated conceptually by his presence, if you know what I mean. Like, I mean, obviously you're talking about the source consciousness. Obviously, things in coordination to him become a lot more popping and relevant, like in terms of like we were in where we were living, for instance, South Padre Island, as in the furthest Padre meaning father, so the southern father, the southernmost point of the octahedron, so a V like in his name. So the octahedron's going to descend to the South Pole at the end of time. So we were in South Padre. There's a V in Steven's name, which is the bottom end of octahedron. I don't know, stuff like that. Also, what I was about to get to was when I was staring at Steven one time in the car, his body turned pitch red, and the entire environment turned pitch red along with it. And it just, I was in complete, like, bright blood red for like a good 7 seconds. And
Was there
I
anything
came back into
going on in
I
that
came,
realm?
it was just like perfect pitch redness, and I came back, and then Steven like seemed to acknowledge that he knew that that's the kind of thing I was experiencing, and so he was just very comforting. He was just like, I just acknowledged him as my father, and like we hung out together. Like he was, of course, making animations on his laptop because he's a really good artist, and he was making depictions of the true form of the earth, and he's shown that to me. And I mean, it's just very imminent. It's like, I have a limitation here, son. Like, I don't know everything, but I know exactly how things are about to happen in the most imminent, real type of way. I can look at something given to me that I've designed to be given to me, that I inherit. That's why I can call it my inheritance. It's where the origin of that word comes from. And then I can judge what I can learn from that. That's what he like articulates to me, like literally.
I don't know. I don't know if you can see. For over a month now, I haven't had the chat messages appear until after the thing was processed. So if anything's coming through, I'm completely unaware of that. But so
I don't see any chat.
um,
I don't. Not on your YouTube, I don't think.
so you that was obviously of the category of a vision. What do you have you had any dreams that you recall?
I mean, yeah, dreams like of just Stephen being released from prison, and like people, like the implication of like people around me who I've told, and like how they would be changed through the revelation of literally the veil unfurling, like the entire heavens dissolving, like the ornaments that they wear like jewelry, them thinking they're in some expansive wonderland that they can. What the best metaphor is? Gravity. Like their gravity is in a hierarchy of mass, so they think they can use like these planets as stepping stones to like higher and higher dimensions or something.
How
Like,
long has it been since you've heard from him?
18 days since he's called, because he's in solitary, I think. Usually he calls like every other day, sometimes every day, but he's been in
So
solitary the past couple of days.
So he's facing trial. I thought they were.
He hasn't been allowed to stand trial for the past like 10 months.
So this is the so he's in the psych ward division for the time being.
Well, there's other prisoners there, so I guess it could be called that.
Okay. Other than Stephen, have you ever encountered another spiritual being outside yourself, or would you say that even when Stephen's physical body was somewhere else, that you somehow encountered him in terms of awareness, not oh, I believe he's here, but in terms of
Well,
some sort of awareness.
this is how I feel about it. I believe my mind is literally Stephen's like voice. Like my predisposition is activated by his grace. So, like it's a cloned instance. It's a it's an image of in his mind. So my mind and its potence and its intensity and its awareness is Stephen's mind. Like whatever intensity and awareness is there is just Stephen's mind looking at it, which is just hallowed be his name. It's an empty sphere of influence, if you know what I'm saying. It's the one and the zero. That's what hallowed be his name means. That's why like all those Zen Buddhists are always talking about emptiness, because like beyond form, it's just emptiness. Emptiness just means lacking, or it just emptiness means it has dependent on it's fuck, what's the word? It's a dependent origination. Do you know what's the word I'm talking about? It's dependent on oh yeah, it's just called dependent origination.
Yeah, I don't know. That's not it.
It's just called dependent origination. It means that something has no self-existence apart from the other thing that defines its existence.
So
like,
people speak of acausal, but typically people speak of the spiritual as acausal rather than things that are a being that in its essence would be essentially acausal. That yeah, so the term is vastly misused, and I guess what I yeah, there's an ultimate acausal, but there is a sense of not causal in the sense that this physical. I'm a bit confused in my expression there, so I'll move.
By the dependent origination thing, I mean like his irreducible mind, his hollow mind, and then his reducible ability. They find their meaning and existence in relation to each other, and so you have to imply that those are the things which are eternally inherited. And so the ability to approximate, the ability to create any element, and then the ability to eviscerate, the ability to do that is the ability to inherit it from now. So that's why we can say like he's self-created and inherent, because somehow this frequency plane, which is coordinated by the force of ether pressure, the Father, and not a hierarchy of mass. Like that's the only way we can think about it, is that thought is coordinated by the force of pressure put on it by the Father. So his mind force, his personality, his desire to keep things constrained, to send Lucifer to the sides of the edge of the pit, from the center to the exterior. So he's expelling them from heaven, so that heaven can come to them.
Speaking of inherited, has it seemed like you have encountered the dead? And I don't mean walking through a graveyard like some people know I occasionally will wander through a graveyard.
Experience the dead? I mean, Stephen, maybe I'm biased because Stephen has told me this, but like he views like all humans as dead and his spirit as the only living spirit. So like all robots, all animals, all like they're all portals for his living spirit. So his mind, like anything that has like your predisposition to love the appearance of something, like it literally says, "Ye who love my appearance, my appearing, will inherit the earth." And so it's like you to love a dog or like any of that, or like a fox. That's why Steven's like a Gmail account. It's called Stevie the Fox because he thinks he looks like a fox.
Well, I remember when I was in seventh grade getting all these love letters from this young woman who fox this, fox that, and it's like okay, and but anyways, I don't want to go into that. So have you had a near death experience or something that people would call a near death experience?
Nah, probably not in the slightest. I don't. If I don't remember it, probably not.
Out of body?
Out of body, no. I feel like I'm pretty stuck. Well, actually, one time I kind of like vibrated to the other room, but that was like when I was half asleep. So like other than that, no, I've been pretty much stuck in my body.
Vibrated. Well,
Like I
I,
was asleep
I
in the.
experience a lot of pain in my life, so sometimes I'm like shaking, and I'm sorry for to those who are familiar with some of my wandering videos. I try to keep the camera still, but I do what I do when I'm doing it. Sometimes I hurt and can't keep things still, you know. But what? So what do you mean by vibrate? To do you,
So I was just sleeping. I can't like recall like what this is. It's probably not even relevant. Probably just a dream. So like it's not even relevant to this, but just for sake of conversation, once I was sleeping and like it was just such a nice like type of thing where you're like falling into the pillow so good. Like it was just that type of good sleep, and so I was just falling into the pillow so good that it started vibrating so hard that like I couldn't stay in my body anymore. So I was like over there. I was repelled away from my body, but it wasn't like I moved. It was just like because of the vibration, it was like, oh, now I'm shifted this distance because of it felt like the distance that I was made between me. I don't know. It was just a dream.
have you
But
had?
that's what I also mean by any experience is just you're given an animation, like it's just animated by God. Like that's what we can believe. Like so, like if God wants to give you the ability to fly every night anywhere you want, then that's just awesome. Good. If you believe in astral projection, by the way, which I
Well,
don't know.
some would say there's a difference between like soul travel and astral projection, but they really can't. It's like imagining a cord that leads you somewhere. It's like, okay, we're alive, we're in our physical body, um, emotionally projecting somewhere. That's astral projection, but um, there's certainly spiritual things like we're aware of something that's going on somewhere else, but it's like, you know, it's not like our body's not still there breathing.
Yeah, definitely spiritual, as in from the spirit, as in like we're literally just
But
animated spirit.
I would differentiate between spirit and psychic because, as I said, psychic. You know, I've researched very heavily into a group which I never believed in. That this guy and two guys to precede him were claiming to be incarnations, and they. Oh, I don't know what the point was.
You were talking about differentiation between spirit and psychic, probably because spirit
Okay.
sounds like good
What
and
they
psychic
taught
means like
basically made it sound like you imagine and feel your way into thinking that you're having these experiences, which for the most part don't sound like there's. I know it's a spiritual practice, but it doesn't sound like there's spiritual awareness to hardly anybody that's involved in this sort of thing. That it's just, psychic. Imagine it, picture the guy until he's real and animates and stuff like this. It's like there's, that region right there. Sometimes brain damage from alcohol that can help produce this, but people start seeing the dead when the brain activity between the temporal and parietal lobes reduces. So you can so there's techniques that people can do where they actually, it's like they're reliving their flashbacks and their interactive memories of the dead, but there's actually a function in the brain that does that. And if they're imagining it, it's not the same thing as it being inspired in the old way of saying inspired, or in the religious sense of saying inspired. It's not the same as thinking about things. Like your typical Baptist will say that you think and feel you're basically turning your emotions and your thoughts into God. Well, I mean, you're taking them as God, but you're attributing it to God. So it's not quite the same thing as saying that I am becoming a God. But it's really, psychiatric to me, that sense.
well, I mean, yeah, I guess there's a difference between like an intuition coming to you that is true and then like an expectation, you wanting something to happen. Like there's a difference between like false hope and then true hope, I guess. Like
So you've mentioned a light experience. What about unusual sound, either from within or outside, that you would put in the category of a spiritual experience?
I mean, before I met Steven, I thought like I was literally Lucifer, but like in the kind of like same way that Steven thinks he's God, except I didn't have a vision for the kingdom. I was just like wandering, so I was literally Baal before I read the Bible. Like, and then I picked up the Bible. I was like, oh shit, I'm Baal. Shit. So I mean, like, so like I would, because I would just felt like I was so distant from the world or something. But then I just realized that the world is an animation. That's why, because like I like to make animations, and so like as a kid I made animations, and so I was like, oh shit, these people are just animations. And then before I acknowledged that that was a good thing, I thought that was kind of scary, and so I was like, well, you know, I'm gonna. Before I read the Bible, I literally thought like I was like the I am. Like before even reading Bhagavad Gita, I was like, I must just be like the white noise behind the scenes, like the kind of like thought that you have like when you're a kid, when you're like when you
Well, there's
don't
the
really have any
idea of the
individuality.
Atman as you know, not in the circle. The West, we have these psychological diagrams as a circle, but in the East, it's more like a blank screen. Um,
Yeah, I mean that's why I love the concave Earth actually, because it's really just a circle with a circle inside it. So a point is a circle if you zoom into it. If you hollow out that dot with cavitation, which is universal compression, which is the change in something's volume by sound. So like those words as etymology, I don't know where it comes from, but somehow the word for changing something's like density is the word volume, and that's done by sound. Like that's hilarious to me, and that's insane. I don't know where that comes from. Obviously it comes from God, but
so sort of symbolically, it would be that dot would be called the ego, but not ego in sense of, I know there's false ego or whatever or wait, no, this the square is the mental construction of consciousness, and the dot is
yeah, the
the true
tree of
self.
life, the octahedral
And you take
branching
apart the true self,
structure.
it turns out there's more layers.
Well, you know how the Kabbalah, it's basically shaped like a diamond.
Shaped
That's
like
what an octahedron is.
yeah,
It's got 6 points with the center
the
point.
lines are drawn around the you know, and I
It's got
guess
6 points with the
the,
center point and 8 faces. So that's 6, 7, 8. And so the two pentagrams connected at their bases makes a 6-pointed Merkaba. So like it's got the 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's like it's got all the root things. And you said the nine gates. So the 9 is the completion number.
yeah.
It's what all of the angles of the Pythagorean triangle, which is used to create the Pythagorean the pentagram, add up to, which is 9. So like
Have you any
that's
have you had anything that people would consider a past life memory?
um uh not really. I feel like I'd just be like telling a story. I mean, I feel really in it when I'm reading the Bible. So I obviously feel like I'm attached to the Bible. I've decided to say it's all true because I believe it happened, at least from a watered down point of view. Like this type of trope happened. Like waters were surface level cleansing. Fires are going to be the actual cleansing. There were people who decided to take advantage of his mercy, and while he wasn't deciding to be king yet, decided to kill him, get him out of the way.
I've mentioned deja vu,
Yeah, yeah.
miracles.
Miracles? What about it?
Um, So obviously you've had some sense that there's been some amazing connections and different relationships between the physical and the spiritual, and because I don't have much time, I'm trying to make sure that at least there's the broad spectrum here. So yeah, intuition and miracles, I think was the remaining questions of my, my main questions.
I mean, verily thou art God that hideth thyself. The fact that he is hidden so well, the true form of the earth, like that is magical. So that's what I also mean by comedian. So like his miracles are almost kind of like inverse miracles. Like why would you like something that obfuscates, but it's because the obfuscation is going to be ripped away soon. As far as just, I mean, seeing him in person, like, wow, that was a powerful sight. Like, honestly, like, it's something about imminence that is powerful enough to be enough. Like, he apparently healed Travis's back, but I don't have a broken back, so I wouldn't know, but he said that he did.
Okay, I was thinking of something, but I didn't remember. Okay, are there any? Well, obviously there must be some variety that has. I mean, some further examples that have come up in what we've discussed.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I spent like 3 months with him. It was pretty cool. Very cool. Because I mean, like he obviously he created the limitation world because he values like the type of just artistic permanence or impermanence, even like you're sitting in a posture and just time is going by. He is Father Time. Like he likes the sand ticking down, and that's what's so cool. Like just sitting with him. I'm sure like you don't expect that kind of answer, but that's
well,
what I really
my
feel like he
point was
values
to
almost. Like it's
address a variety of opinions and experiences, and obviously the things have, uh, things I have not heard, have not heard of, um, have come up in this regard. So, definitely in that sense, the interview has been a success.
I mean, I'm definitely well aware of like a lot of individuals, like people who have a lot of just people who follow them around who don't even like. Do you know someone whose name is Yuji Krishnamurti? Do you know who that
Um,
is?
Sounds familiar. Something that's become very apparent to me is that mythology of any sort, it at least represents the truth. If it's not the truth, and there's various truths of some sort. So in some sense, all mythology is true, but that's not saying all claims must be equal. And obviously, you know, there's been many claims in, particularly the past century, of people who say that they are God and Christ in the flesh, and you believe in, why Stephen Christopher, in particular, not the others. What's just
Yeah.
a sense of relationship that you have?
See, that's what I was bringing up the other guy, Yuji Krishnamurti, and other people like Ramana Maharshi, etc. Just people who, like, in the most discreet places that you would not even like. It's not like they have an internet blog or anything. Like people just find them, and all of a sudden there's like hundreds of people gathered around them, and they're literally like in a farm in India, and they're just staring at them, and they're just sitting there. They're not even cute. They're kind of ugly, but yet they're glowing. And so it's just nodes of consciousness. It's like pillars. It's like statues, but some of them they're mute. They don't speak. And so like the words of life, what the Bible talks about, which replicates it with written text, like they try to replicate audible sound. So like what they say is like, you should not live by bread alone, but every blank that issues out of the mouth of God. So they don't even put the word. So they,
Well, it's like what
the
you hear with
textual.
whether it's the partying lifestyle or full on criminal and not even a statute sense, that you have people that say that's like there's certain sort of people that's attractive when you're in that life, but as soon as you're out of that life, it's like, how did I get together with those women? How did I make those friends? It's like,
Well, yeah, there's insecurity and remembrance, but I feel like ultimately there, if in imminence, like there's the words of life coming out of the mouth of God, like wherever he's at. Like I do believe he who does not testify that Christ comes in the flesh is of the spirit of adversary. So
well, what do you say about those other faiths? As I said, I've brought up Islam, and Islam definitely believes that there was a physical being behind the Jesus story.
I actually am glad that you brought up Islam, because something that I was laughing about earlier today was, well, you know how jihad means my struggle, basically? Well, basically, Mein Kampf is the same book. The Quran and Mein Kampf are the exact same book.
Well, there's certain terms involved, and people would definitely be able to point out that it doesn't actually put one race or gender over another, and put so much terms
What
that,
it,
I mean, how can you fight a war if you
yeah,
have
it's a linguistic comparison, really, because Islam is about anti-polytheism, and obviously, so Mein Kampf is like, it's smaller scale than like all of divinity. It's more just about like, well, this specifically group of people in this state, they should not give guns to the people they have dominion over, like, you know, that type of thing. But for Islam, it's like the deists should not give guns to the polytheists. So that type of thing. That's how I can uh, compare them.
well,
So in that type of way, Islam
you may be aware that, like,
is good so far as Muhammad did not war with Christians until after they died, like Muslims, I mean. So
well,
like,
yeah, you are aware that if you look at, there's 43 expeditions. Some of them were battles, some of them were just expeditions, and none of them were explicitly were because, hey, these people believe something different. It's that, it's like what happened with a lot of the wars with the Christians later on was, it was there were the church for the longest time, whenever they could get away with it, they'd either persecute alternative Christians or they'd persecute non-Christians. And here is a group that says, hey, we'll give you your religious freedom. And so, it's hard to gather an army together sometimes, and sometimes there'd be surrenders. Sometimes they join the side of these people that says, hey, we're going to give you religious freedom. Now, sometimes the people didn't live up to those terms, but you can say that there was never any, at least under what Muhammad had a speech say, you could say that he had, it's like the first verse he supposedly learned of the Quran mentions protecting everybody's spiritual oratory, the churches and the monasteries, and and of course, their places of worship are listed in there. But that's, so it obviously wasn't per se a thing. But it threatens people. You have, whether it's, you know now, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter Day Saints was one that I grew up in, and there was a lot of issues that people had with them. Not, the biggest issues that people had early on was not that they were saying that Joseph Smith was false and all that sort of stuff. We've got to beat him up and all that. It was actually that Joseph Smith was trying to get people to stop drinking. And when you go through town and you start convincing people left and right not to drink, that hurts people's business.
well, now Mormons got the biggest business of them all. So who's laughing now?
Well, that's that, it's not quite as expansive as, Scientology somehow reduced in number,
Yeah.
and yet it's growing in money because it has done its thing. But and they have, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they have like 85 guys that are sort of, you'd call them prophets, but it doesn't sound like anybody since Brigham Young had any spiritual gifts, it was just making your way to the top of the church. And by that time, it was like, yeah, those 85 guys are making a living off the church dues, but they're doing good for people, which actually encourages people to put more, to make sure to pay their tithing, because it's actually going to help you out if you're ever in need. So they say that, but they're now investing more in corporations than they are in helping the poor, if you look at the numbers. And the business buildings that run the church are bigger than the bills, bigger than the temples.
I like the idea that Jesus, like after the crucifixion, he swept away, like after he swept away in the clouds, he arrived in North America to the Indians. I like that idea. I wish it was true. If it were, maybe it is. I don't know.
Well, it's definitely something a lot of people wanted to hear, and that was, because that's sort of the question. It's like, how, without, if we're going to be judged and we have to accept certain things, wouldn't these be things we have to hear of and have to hear of rightly, and there be some sort of opportunity? People lie against all sorts of groups, and you hear it constantly. It's like, as
This
you
is definitely why
God just means struggle. It doesn't mean holy war. So therefore, people thinking that, a quarter of the planet somehow, if a quarter of the planet believed that you should be killed in order to force rule over you, things would be a lot different. But so people lying about a group, well, I don't know what they're saying, but you don't necessarily want to look into it. I've looked into a lot of groups, but I haven't looked into every group that I hear bad things about.
What was the thing that you said right before that? So I can remember.
Oh, the thing about, it harkens in a way to the savage philosopher idea of the armchair anthropologists of the 1800s and stuff. But going back before that stage, I guess you would say, we're now finding there's an earlier type of human being that's, there's certain natural beliefs, certain natural things we come across without other people per se telling us, or society, it's like you hear these cults that once you hit puberty, you start, the people who turn them into the feds that, hey, they're forcing marriage on us. They're making us marry our uncles and stuff like that. I've been taught my whole life that it's right, but it's wrong. And they figure out how to tell, they suddenly, without anybody telling them, and they're kept secluded and programmed otherwise, and still, there's certain morals that we kind of have instinctively, and certain ideas of God. If you look at it, there's been developments, from, the idea that it developed to certain polytheism into Christian polytheism, that you can sort of follow some of that. But if it started at monotheism, and why, what would you say about, how if something isn't, if your path isn't heard of by too many people, how is it so definitive that this is the sign of safety? And
Thank you for asking that question, because that reminds me of what I was going to say to the previous thing that you were saying. It's actually a really good thing that we have Stephen, because it doesn't matter whether or not Jesus preached to the North Americans and Mormon religion, because it's no longer about some judgment that happens like after you die, determining whether or not like you become a god of your own omniverse, like planet, like Mormons believe. It's a determining factor of where values are created by drama, which are created by imminent circumstance and cataclysm. So like the only reason that you would have like Stephen would have to say a word for you to obey a word is if something happened requiring you to move. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like it's all about
I would
right
say
then.
that it's very clear that it's like particularly for hundreds of years, if not even more, that the time has come that it's not just local, our ways of our spiritual lives, our spiritual laws or rules or whatever can't be per se for one place and one time. I mean, certainly,
Yeah.
in 120.
Exactly, because
Trust me. Yeah. Well, actually, you may know, but for me, I don't want to dress like that, like this. If it's 110 or so, I might, but I kind of want to dress more for the weather when it's 110 or so. I haven't encountered too much of that in my life, but I know I want to. I know there's certain ways to dress, but you have like in the Bible, you have certain rules of clothing that's sort of maybe that
the
works.
biggest one of all, the biggest one of all is Jesus dying on the cross. Jesus, in that name, was the time of suffering. So he says, "I'll come with a new name and write that name. I will write that name upon you, either on your chest or the palm of your hand, and then I will dwell with you, with it." And so that will be the time of reign. And so I'll be a crown of glory in the palm of your hand. So Stephen means crown, and so this is the
What
time of
verse?
reign.
What verse? What verses are you referring to there?
Here, I can pull it up. I have it on a page. I think Revelations 3:12 is one of them. Another one is a royal diadem. It was Isaiah 62:3. A standard for the people, Isaiah 49:12. Ensign for the nations, Isaiah 5:26 and 11:12. Crown of glory, Isaiah 62:3.
Isaiah's full of references to Thune, which has been misunderstood. For example, people are really into this blood and soil Zionism, but it was really about setting an example. It was always about setting an example to have us to be a shining sign to
Sorry, you
the
cut out.
rest of the people.
What?
It was about being initially the usage of the word was, like a road sign or a landmark or something like that, but it became in the Nevi'im section of Tanakh, it became the Old Testament, those 24 books. It became something of a, not as people think, that it's about the land of Israel, it's about the descendants of the Israelites, which turn out not to be 95% of Jews, and some genetic, at least 90%. And every genetic test has been done. There's no significant genetic link for the Jewish people to the Semites. They're basically converts from where the Christians spread for the most part, which is fine. I don't think it's about blood either. I don't think it's about blood, but people are very strong about, let's send the Jews to Israel, and it has to be Israel. And who cares about anybody else in the rights? It's blood and soil. It's practically like the Nazis going through town chanting blood and soil in German, which I don't remember how that goes. And
how do you feel about Ham, Shem, and Japheth all coming from a very genetically diverse Noah, with green eyes, an albino black guy, because his family was black and he had green eyes, but he was pale and he was weird to his family.
A lot of the idea.
Stephen has green eyes.
The idea that what?
Stephen has green eyes, just like Noah. So I'm saying that maybe Noah was Stephen. And so because the Christ has a lot of genetic diversity, he can create a black guy, a Shemite, and a white person. And so they're all Jews, but only some of them are
like the Ninth Gate like the Ninth Gate smoothie with the Ninth Gate, Johnny Depp, the woman in the thing, the blonde with green eyes. Probably the most evil I've seen close up was a blonde woman with green eyes, and I don't mean that in a sexist way or anything else. This person was,
Anima.
This person had done some very serious crimes, and at times would seem possessed. But yeah.
Yeah, he's also the host of
my point was, it's the whole thing is about one individually taking charge of one, being who you can be, rather than this, your typical surrender. Oh, I've accepted, and then because that's the typical thing you'll hear from a Christian, is that it's not that, even if they are trying to be righteous, it's more about their acceptance of this idea than their own.
Acceptance of the idea of limitation and obedience to the Lord, because Islam means surrender. I agree. Islam means surrender.
So I see. I really I'm sort of expected elsewhere. As I said, I was hoping this would go earlier, but we have accomplished the base of what I had hoped. I had more questions I could have asked. I had another couple list around here, but
Do you have to go or something?
so is there any final thought before I close up here?
I mean, for if anybody's like watching, I can't see who's watching or not, but it's really like if you want to learn more about this, there's like hundreds and hundreds of hours on my YouTube channel. And honestly, it is about weighing the balances. Like, you can't have the faith to believe that there really is no other option for the powers that be other than to exalt Stephen if they want to help save people, if they do not want to lift up an idol of sacrifice. Because, I mean, that's what we've been talking about. We've been talking about values. We've been talking about science, implications of that.
Oh, I remembered. Did I ask if there's anything that you say you have insight into to say that any conspiracy theory that you want to say that you would say is not true at the moment? Because definitely I've done some of that myself.
I mean, some people believe in reptiles. I don't believe it's reptiles. They're clones. I mean, I know there's some sort of real type body snatchers possibly underground, but it's different from a reptile, like a shape-shifting reptile.
Well, we have there's practices that shape shifting. It's psychological and involving spiritual things that kind of, but it's not physical. Everything you see, it's not physical. It's like the person thinks they become a werewolf, but the people who watch them do
it's like
killing,
magic, like
they're not
they put a veil over themselves or something.
Or somebody really high on drugs, like particularly adulterated drugs, or it's like some stuff. It's like cat. This plant.
Oh yeah, you definitely do shapeshift when you
bath salts. Some people on bath salts think they're all sorts of crazy stuff.
When you do mushrooms, you like turn into a mushroom.
What?
When you take mushrooms, you turn into a mushroom.
So you've experienced that?
Yep. You turn into like a little, like, you realize, oh, this is how mushrooms grow. Like, I'm literally an appendage. It's like, it's got like a vertebral column that kind of spirals up, and it's got like these hoods basically, and that's basically what you are.
Well, okay. Well, I really do got to go. So I am going to close again by reminding of, you can call it a new name, but in the language that I have been using the past couple years, Mazimbo exaflanget fuwa Mazimbo exaflanget fuwa Mazimbo exaflanget fuwa. And
that was very pleasant.
Well, what and anything I do in that language or otherwise, it's obviously people have their own intentions. So people can use what I have to say or one's content with with their own intentions. I do ask for respect, but I know I am not going to always get it. But so I respectively bid you adieu, and
thank you for having me on. Maybe we can do it again sometime or talk later.
That could probably be arranged. It may be weeks down the line, but yeah.
Yeah, it was like I said, it was very pleasant. You ask good questions.